Russia then reporting 1 casualty, Ukraine claiming 100. Who do you believe?
Well, if the Rapusha landing craft was hit and it had a full complement of crew on it and the destruction was catastrophic, which the pictures seem to show, you'd prefer to believe the Ukrainian version rather than the Russian version. It doesn't look like it's going to be going anywhere soon. But it really comes into the notion of the deep battle from the Ukrainian side, because this is the 4th of this class to be hit. The Ukrainians need to take this out so that the Russians, when at some stage the Kerch Bridge goes down, have a limited capacity to logistically reinforce both the Crimean Peninsula and the forces which are posited towards Zaporizhia and Kherson through Crimea. So I think it is a good move from the Ukrainian perspective. It's part of their deep battle. It's the part of the anti-access area denial campaign that they've been following, and that allows them to have sort of won the battle of the Black Sea, so that the politics of food is in their favor. That is, that they can now export their grain again in the way that they couldn't a year ago.
So this is very importantly, both then in that case, both tactically and for morale.
Yes, it is. And if you add to that again the fact that 3 Russian Su-34 aircraft were also knocked out of the skies on the 21st, 22nd of December, again, that plays into this anti-access area denial that I talked about. That pushes the Russians back. I don't think the Russians thought that the Patriot systems could hit them where they were, because the Su-34s, for example, were trying to launch missiles from Russian territory, but were taken out there. So it's 2 big surprises for the Russians, which they didn't expect over this Christmas period.
You talk of the surprises that the Russians have had. And also we've heard of the Ukrainians pushing Russians and the amount of deaths and casualties also inflicted. But it's also difficult to get an impression as to who is stronger. What kind of retaliation can Ukraine expect from the Russians?
Well, retaliation is really always happening at the moment. I mean, there was last night there was another drone wave towards Ukraine. Most of those were knocked out. Again, this is part, from their perspective, of their deep battle. So you have really 4 types of politics from the Russian side in train. The first one is the politics of energy, which the Ukrainians survived last winter. They will try and take out the critical national infrastructure again this winter to freeze the Ukrainian people into shattering their will. The second one is the politics of fear, where again, over the next 6 months, we'll hear some nuclear saber rattling from Putin. The third one is the politics of food with the grain, which I mentioned, the Ukrainians having won that. But the one that we really worry about from the Western perspective, or analysts like me, is the politics of fatigue. That is, people after 22 months saying, surely they should get to a negotiated settlement or some ceasefire. This has been going on long enough. And that is really the theory of victory from Putin's perspective. They can't beat the Ukrainians on the battlefield. It is not a stalemate at the moment. It is a deadlock, and deadlocks can be unlocked. And the Russians are having some limited tactical successes all along the border. And indeed, this year they've reclaimed 850 square miles and lost 372. So it's not a stalemate. And the key thing about, if you were to go down the notion of saying it was a stalemate, is it is an eroding stalemate. And that can either erode politically, militarily, or in terms of the support you get from your local people or internationally. And that plays into both the Putin's election in March 23, and of course, if it was a contest in the American election in November 23 between, for example, Biden and Trump. And Trump, of course, has said he wouldn't support Ukraine in the future. And at the moment, we've got a bit of stasis in the Senate with the $60 billion package for Ukraine. Yesterday, they were given $250 million, and that is the final authorization that's left in the monetary pocket from the American side at the moment.
So just very quickly, you talk about this difficulty, I suppose, between where the war is going. How important is that continued Western support if we are either to support or to end the conflict?
It's important in three ways: military, humanitarian, and economic. So the military side, we need all the Western nations to still keep chipping in. On the economic side, there's going to be a €20 million debt restructuring, I think, to make sure that Viktor Orban doesn't have a sort of caveating and a veto on what the EU might do. And people still need feeding in Ukraine, because although they've got lots of grain, there's lots of internally displaced personnel. And if you believe in the sort of international rules-based system, then you absolutely want Ukraine to win, because we'll be living in a different world if you let Russia win in the future.